Hi everyone, welcome to eLearnChat, where talk, it's knowledge. And today we're joined by two people who like to talk, and they like to do a lot of different things, a lot of energy. We've got David Kelly with us from the eLearning Guild, and we've got our co-host, the one and only, Leslie Price. How are you guys today?
Wonderful. Thanks for having me.
Good. Let's get the intro going, and then we'll start. Here we go. And we're back. Well, thanks for joining us, David. And tell us a little bit of what's going on in your world right now.
Sure. Right now we are at the Guild. We are working on two major conferences. We have Realities 360, which is coming up in just under a month now. That's our new conference. It's second annual conference. It's our newest conference in our portfolio. This is a conference that we launched last year, fully dedicated to exploring augmented reality, virtual reality, and simulations. We launched it last year in recognition of all the energy and interest that's in our field for these technologies. People exploring them had a lot of questions. Response to it was extremely high. We actually sold out last year, so we expanded the conference a bit this year, and looking forward to continuing that conversation and exploring it all. And then concurrently with that, we're in the process of working on DevLearn for the fall.
That's great. Now, where is this one being held? Realities?
Realities 360 is being held in San Jose, in Silicon Valley, at the Fairmont Hotel.
Oh, the Fairmont. That's a nice place.
Yeah, it's a great place.
Actually, isn't that where DevLearn started?
It's been there. I don't know if it was where it actually started.
It might have been the first place. I think. I'm trying to remember. I think that was the first place they had it, but I may be wrong.
It could be. It's definitely been there. I don't know if it was the initial year that they had it there, though.
Yeah, interesting.
It's interesting that you're doing stuff on augmented reality, virtual reality, because you're probably familiar, David, that of the learning technologies. So as well as you coming to the Learning Technologies Conference, there's also a Learning Technologies Awards program. And last year I was actually a judge on the virtual reality simulation category. And it's interesting the different takes that different companies, different people have on it, and what some people think is simulation or virtual reality compared to what others think is, to all intents and purposes, they say it's the same thing, but it's very different. So I'd be interested in your views on the different things that you've seen.
Sure. Well, there's definitely, it's a hard thing to identify. Right now we have this idea, like VR as an example. We have this definition that it's virtual reality. And I would argue that when I see what's in practice, that definition is not sufficient. We have things that are like a Google Cardboard thing that you just put on your face and hold up and look around. And then you have things that are fully immersive like Oculus Rift or HTC Vive. And they really don't belong in the same category. They are technically virtual reality, but the experience that you have is radically different. The mere fact that when you're in Oculus Rift or HTC Vive, your hands are physically in the environment, as compared to a passive thing where you're not interacting at all, you're just kind of looking around. Both have their value propositions, but to kind of put them in the same bucket and say they're both VR, they're the same thing, I would argue against that myself.
Yeah, and the amount of
honestly, what you just said, you have actually put it all in a nutshell. Because when we were judging that category, and I've been a judge on these awards for a long time, but this category was a new category, and trying to judge it was incredibly difficult, because what one person thinks is new and is innovative and is VR or AI, compared to what somebody else was saying, sometimes they were light years apart.
Also, like what you said, the effort in programming the Google Cardboard type stuff versus The Oculus Rift is night and day. It's a whole lot more work doing the actual full 100% virtual reality, and it's a lot more budget. Whereas the other ones now are kind of an augmented e-learning, if you will, where you are using it for training or whatever you're using it for, but it's not as hard. It's just a level more difficult than, let's say, a normal type of thing. It's more of an immersive e-learning than it is a true 100% virtual reality. I'll tell you, we bought our first 360 camera, the Ricoh, I forgot what it's called, Beta or Theta, something or other.
Yep.
And they're fun, but they're tricky to shoot with. It takes a while to get used to that stuff and to figure out how to hide yourself from the shots, because otherwise you wind up in every single shot. It's different. And then how you present it and what you do. Like at first we started, we're traditional video guys. We do a lot of video. So we're moving around with it. Everybody's getting sick. It's like, oh my God, what are you guys doing? Then we realized you just have to kind of stand in one place, film 5 seconds, and that's pretty much all you need for that shot. Yeah. And it's a different way of doing things, but it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, and one of the things that's interesting, I mean, it's one of the reasons we host the conference is it's such a rapidly evolving space that people have questions, and anytime there's questions, we have an opportunity through the work that we do to host a forum to explore those questions and help a community get to the answers. And one of the things I'm seeing just most recently that echoes what you're talking about that's really interesting to me is we're seeing this emergence of what they're referring to as VR 180, emerging where it's not 360 degrees. It's just basically fully in front of you. Yeah. Because very often, no matter what you do in a 360 environment, or at least the majority of the 360 environments, you might be following the action within a 360 degree space, but the reality is you're only looking at the 180 at any given time, and whatever you're looking at in front of you, chances are you might have the environment behind you, but there's nothing going on.
Right.
And to your point, filmmakers or people who are creating these experiences have found it difficult to translate the world of film that I know in this 2D space to this 360 degree environment. But when you take the trade-off of saying, well, no one's ever looking at what's going on behind them anyway, so what if we just focused on the 180 space that's in front of someone? Then it almost becomes a very large 2D space that is more traditional environment for a filmmaker, and they're starting to see a lot more traction in that space, which is really interesting to watch. Yeah,
we've been doing things like you said, the 180, and then when they turn around, all of a sudden there's a person in the film saying, "No, you're in the wrong room. You need to go over there," and it kind of makes it a little more come to life, because otherwise, you're right. You're just sort of in a flat environment that you can look around. And then you have to be careful how you turn around and everything else. It's interesting.
But Rick, can't that actually also, I mean, you got to understand my background is in what we call in the UK, further education, you call in the US, community college. So, with young people where you're trying to teach them skills like plumbing, electricity, masonry, carpentry, all very, very, or even you could go into nursing and handling skills, all very, very hands-on skills, which what they're starting to do in the UK, and I know Donald Clark is doing quite a lot of work in this area, is trying to get this more, I'm not saying totally immersive, but more immersive technology into helping young people build up skills in apprenticeships, so that when they then go to be on site doing plumbing, doing masonry, doing carpentry, or as I say, in care environments where doing lifting, doing handling, the type of skills you can build up, even if it's just viewing them through AR, whatever you want to call it, VR, and I think it's a combination of all of them, I think has got huge potential.
I saw one recently where they were showing, it was a VR, it was with Google Cardboard, but it was paramedics showing how to use the jaws of life to rescue somebody. That was really interesting. It actually looked good. It gave you a real good idea where you had to put it, how you had to maneuver it and use it, which was one step better than click on this, click on that, see if you can figure that out. So it wasn't 100% immersive in terms of you're clicking, you're touching it or anything, but you're definitely watching and actually I think you're able to interact a little bit with how it was opening, and it was pretty cool. And yeah, you're right. You could do so much with that in terms of any kind of trades.
What's interesting is we're going through, and you go through this with any technology really, but we're going through this period with both VR. VR is a little further ahead in the adoption curve than AR right now. I think long term they'll catch up and AR will actually surpass it. But right now we're going through with both of this period of it's cool, and let's look at all the cool things we could do, but we've still got to get past that to the what problem is this going to solve that I can't solve with the existing technologies? What's the unique value proposition of AR and VR? And it's there, and we're getting closer to it, but we're still at this point where we should be at this point of the conversation of figuring that out. And the experiments that people are doing, like what you're talking about with the Jaws of Life and some of the other examples that you see people sharing, are helping us get a better understanding of where these technologies work, where they don't work as well, and where their true unique value proposition is. And that's really the most exciting part for me, because I do think both AR and VR do have their, a lot of people, when you talk about a new technology, they talk about, oh, this is going to be the new thing, and it's going to kill the classroom, it's going to kill this. Nothing's ever going to kill anything. It's just a matter of a new technology, a new tool to the belt that can be better at serving a particular job. And I think both AR and VR are going to serve a very specific need as we go forward.
And I think both of them are going to need what they're calling AI, artificial intelligence. So I think it's not just VR or AR. It's the combination when you then bring in, and I know there's a lot of controversy around AI and can computers really think? Can computers really learn?
Well, we're trying to figure out if humans can learn. That's another issue. Sorry, I'm being cynical.
But I think it is something. You were talking about Jaws of Life there, Rick. If you did something like that and you were using AI, could the computer actually work out and remember a better way of doing it? That somebody does it once, and then when it's like, I'm sure you've been asked to, what made you do that? What made you work that way? What made you think that way? And you say, I can't remember.
Right. Well, they are doing things like that in medicine with computer-assisted surgeries. So you have certain machines like Da Vinci, which is used a lot in gynecological applications. It's quite intricate, and it saves a lot of patients much more than traditional surgeons by themselves did, because it's micro instrumentation, really, really small, and they can get in and leave a lot less damage than maybe the old way. So the surgeon, in essence, is using joysticks and some other buttons to control a computer that can get in and it magnifies everything that he's seeing or she's seeing to do a better job of it. So we are seeing that already in the medical industry with computer assisted. But as a computer by itself, I don't know. I mean, look at the operating systems we have and the embedded systems. Some work, some have issues. Can you imagine a blue screen of death right in the middle of a surgery? That wouldn't be too good. I mean, and you could, and that, I don't think we're there yet. I think, and then when you talk about, how smart some computers are, they're not. They're programmed to recognize patterns and try to figure out, based on the patterns and other things that they've gone through, how much they can learn to do. But computers aren't they don't work as fast as our brains, for example. We can recall things much quicker than a computer can, though the computers are very fast.
You're obviously younger than me.
Yeah. I don't know. You have a good memory.
So where do you think it's going to go then, David? All this AR, VR, AI?
Well, AI I kind of separate that from the AR, VR conversation. AI is I don't think that, while there are opportunities to leverage it for learning, I think it's something that's just going to happen in our daily lives, and we're going to watch it and we're going to see what the implications of learning are going forward. AR and VR as specific tools, I think the use cases are emerging within that, which is going to be great. I do think long-term, this is just my own speculation, I think VR will eventually find a very, very specific niche. Anything that is the risk of failure is literally life and death. The opportunity to practice in a virtual environment justifies the resources necessary to create that environment in a virtual world. So things like, and we're already seeing applications of this in areas like firefighting, like surgery, where the opportunity of practicing something, even though you wouldn't necessarily want someone to go from the VR headset to the operating table, the opportunity of getting some practice and have an understanding of the process and everything in a virtual environment before you practice it in a non-virtual environment, or before you're literally applying it in the real world where the cost of failure is life and death. There's a huge application to that. I do think longer term, AR has a much broader application. I do think the opportunities of using AR in the workplace, even in contexts that a lot of organizations won't necessarily look at as training or e-learning, they're just going to look at it as support to do a job. That's going to be a very, very broad thing, especially as the hardware and the technologies get beyond something like right now, AR is having a very important moment of normalization within our society by the fact that we're seeing it in AR Kit and AR Core, where it's in our phones, which is getting the opportunity for people to understand that you can have an augmented experience on top of the real world normalized a bit. You still have the device in your hand, which is enabling you, like, I can have an augmented reality experience to see something, but in order to physically interact with that, I have to put down my phone. When you have something like the technology of a Google Glass, even though Google Glass is, it didn't work in a consumer edition and now it's just an enterprise edition. When you have like the glasses that you wear today and the technology embedded into that, or some of the AR headsets that you have now that just look like goggles, and it's just normalized, that's going to have applications that are well beyond what we look at as support within a workplace today.
Right, David, I'm going to put you on the spot now, my lovely.
Sure.
Can you please explain to a lot of the people who will be watching this, either live or recorded, what is the difference between AR and VR? So what's the difference between virtual reality and augmented reality?
Sure. I thought we might get to a point where I was like, can we pause for a moment while I do some research? But I think I can handle it. So AR. So let's talk with VR first. So VR is, they get conflated because they both have this headset idea attached to them. But VR is, you are literally blocking out the real world to go into a different environment. You are not interacting with the physical world. You put on a headset and you are literally someplace else interacting with a different place. AR is not blocking out the real world. It is a glass that is in front of the real world that has interaction, that has content that is interfaced on top of the real world. So imagine an overly simplified example. You're walking around, I walk around Manhattan and I'm navigating the space. I could be looking at Google Maps on my phone. And imagine if that Google Maps was in a VR headset where I'm looking at a map, but I'm not seeing the real world around me. I'm looking at a virtual map to direct me with a virtual reality headset on, but I have no awareness of the physical world around me because it's blocked out. As compared to if I had an AR headset on and I'm looking at the street in front of me, but there's a digital arrow that's at the end of the block that's telling me to go right, where it's giving me contextual feedback that has to do with the real world. And that's a totally different type of an environment. Does that help answer the question?
Kind of, but I still think to most people who work in learning, who are not familiar with all the language and terminology that we use, I still think there is a degree of confusion between the difference between AR and VR.
I think I agree, and I would link that confusion to a longer a confusion that has existed with our field for a long time, which I would describe as the difference between training and performance support.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I wouldn't disagree.
Yeah, VR is a great tool for training someone on how to do a task. AR is a great tool for giving someone support while they're actually performing the task.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And there's another thing too, where I think people get a little bit confused. Add another reality, alternate reality. And a lot of people think alternate reality is augmented reality, which is virtual. They get confused with, I've heard that term. I was watching some news show once, and they were saying, one of the latest trends in alternate reality is, I was going, alternate reality. So now we're really kind of going off on the deep end, because it really isn't alternate per se. That's like a totally separate reality.
Well, you've got these terms that are emerging in the industry, like XR, alternate reality, mixed reality, that are people trying to find a term that describes when you're blending the two. For instance, the most cutting edge example of VR that I've experienced right now is something that they have in Orlando. They had it in London when I was there last time at the mall that was there. It's called The Void, and it is a free roaming VR experience, which I would personally describe, even though it's predominantly VR, as a mixed reality type of a thing, because not only were you having this headset that was creating this environment, but the physical aspects of the environment that were around you could interact with as well. You were actually feeling things, like you saw a wall, you saw a switch on the wall, you reached out in the virtual environment and you touched it physically with your hand, which is, to me, a mix between this idea of a virtual and a mixed reality, where you have physical objects in your space that you are interacting in the virtual world and the physical world at the same time.
Now, did you have to wear gloves?
Well, that was the most fascinating part of the technology for me, which is because they're usually in a VR experience, you have wands, and that's how they translate your hands into the experience. They don't see your hands, they see the wands, and based on how you're holding it, you see your hands in a different space, which is in a space. The most fascinating thing about that experience is I was confused. I'm like, well, I wonder how they're going to do this. I don't have wands. And I thought maybe they were going to give us gloves, and they didn't. And the first part of the experience, when they're testing out the technology, they tell you to put the headset down, and they ask you if you can see the other people that are in the room, the other players, and you can see them. And then they say, can you see your hands? And I'm like, what do you mean, can I see my hands? And I looked down with the headset on, and I saw my hands in the virtual world without having any technology on it. It just there were cameras on the front of the screen that I guess were able to recognize your hands and put them into the virtual world.
Interesting.
So how are you going to bring this all into this conference you're having then, David?
One of the things that we're doing at Reality is I consider, especially where the technologies are today, both AR and VR, to learn about them, it's very similar. The analogy I often use is it's similar to riding a bicycle. We could sit here and talk for the next hour about what it means to ride a bicycle and how you ride a bicycle, but if you've never ridden one, the only way you're really going to understand what it means to ride a bike is when you get on one and start pedaling. That's when you really understand, oh, this is what it means to ride a bike. I kind of feel like AR and VR are the same thing. I'm always surprised at how many people that are interested in VR and have a conversation with me. I just spoke at a conference the other day, a couple of weeks ago, that I did a VR session. There were probably 300 people in the room. And I just asked the question at the beginning, how many of you have put on a headset? Or how many of you have not had an opportunity to put on a headset? And I would say about a third of the room raised their hand, which is always stunning to me. I said, here's your task. Go down to the expo hall, find a booth that has one, and put it on, because you don't understand what it's like. And the conference was built with that in mind. We have a technology showcase at the conference where we have vendors who are playing in the space coming, but you had to qualify to play. I mean, it wasn't a typical expo where if you want to exhibit, you can. You had to be able to bring something in the VR or AR space that people could experience. And if you weren't able to do that, then it wasn't an appropriate slot for you. And so we have this technology showcase where attendees at the conference can go and experience what members of the vendor community, and we are displaying some technology ourselves, that they can experience it and see some of these early applications of VR and AR in a training and education space.
So people will be able to come along to your event and actually see it live, see it and experience it live.
Absolutely. We've got, I think, 20 different stations that are planned for the technology showcase where you can go and try something out, whether it be an actual training application that somebody from our vendor community has built, or whether it be something that's just available in the consumer market that we're bringing into the technology showcase so that people can experience it.
Yeah.
Because we truly believe the more people play with these technologies and experience them for themselves, the more they will be able to put it in the right context of how to use it for L&D.
Yeah. And I know you're very, very, very much like me, that, content is great, but context is king.
Oh, absolutely. And for me, that's the core value of why we're hosting this conference. We want people to be able to come to this conference and be able to answer the question of, are these technologies a viable solution for my organization? Because it's not, people are always coming to me and asking, is VR a good thing? It's just kind of like, well, let's have a conversation. I'm not going to tell you whether it is or it isn't without having any context around how you plan to use it or what problem it might solve for your organization.
Yeah.
And that's what we want to be. We don't want to come in and say this is or is not a good thing. I mean, I personally am passionate about it. I think there's huge possibilities there. But you may also work for an organization where it's just not a fit. And that's not good or bad. It's just where your organization is today and what problems you're looking to solve. And that's what we're looking to host at the conference. It's for people who are curious about that or who know that they want to go in this direction and want to learn how. That's what we've built the conference around, those two main value propositions.
That's great. Now
have you got speakers coming who've, sorry, Rick, I'm
go ahead.
Overtaking you all on this. So have you got speakers, keynote speakers, session speakers, who are then going to be able to talk about their experiences coming along, David?
Absolutely. We've got some of our speakers are early adopters in this space who have already actually applied some of these technologies for their learning programs. So they're going to share their lessons learned and what they've learned along the way. We've got sessions that are going to explore how to, so you can actually learn how to do these things. We've got sessions from people who are exploring the why behind these things and how to incorporate it into your strategy and how to make those decisions. We've got a lot of sessions based on research that have been going on around what works and what doesn't, and what the consumer industry is doing and what that means for training and development. And keynotes are going to be supporting that as well. We're really excited about this year's event. I think we've got a lot to deliver that's going to add value not only to the attendees, but to help foster this conversation for our industry as we go forward.
Yeah.
That sounds great. Can you put up the website again?
I'll shut up now. It's just a topic that really interests me.
So, and what dates is this?
This is June 26th through 28th in San Jose.
Great.
I just think it would be an event. I'm not one necessarily to always promote events, but one like this, I think, will actually be really interesting for people who want to find out more, who want to learn. So for learning people who want to learn, this to me would be, if I lived in the US, this is something I think I would be delighted to attend.
Well, you should come out anyway, Leslie. You should come out anyway.
No, I've just been to Australia, for goodness sake.
Oh, that's nice.
That's far enough. Well, anyway, we are at the end of our time. David, as always, a pleasure having you on. We appreciate you coming and sharing. And Leslie, we'll see you next week. And for all you folks watching, definitely. Oh, David, what's the best way for people to get a hold of you? A website or?
Oh yeah, you can reach out to my personal website, davidkelly.me, has all my contact information. You can always find me on Twitter, LNDDave, or via all the social channels on the Guild sites as well.
Okay, great. And we'll put that in the show notes for people to get a hold of you. So again, thanks for coming on. And if you're watching the show, please subscribe. Give us feedback. We'd love to hear from you. And feel free to contact guests and us. We'll see you next week on eLearnChat. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Okay, thanks. Bye.